Hi, I'm Ghada. Where do the plastics that we are talking about would end up? Thank you. Where would that end up? And why do we want to know? Of course, we cannot measure everywhere. So we use yet another model to simulate and predict the accumulation zones. So in the marine environment, the water movement is governed by wind, by waves. Then you have the circulation, the flow field. The seasonal variability is governed by the salinity. So the salinity, you have salinity fronts, you have temperature. All of those are governing the movement of the water. The plastics, or the marine litter, in that case, plastics, are actually moving into the oceans and the seas according to this circulation. They end up in something called accumulation zones. Those accumulation zones are very important to identify because they are potentially high-risk hotspots for the marine organism. That's why we use the models actually to simulate this and to predict the accumulation zones. So in that case, if we discharge plastics in the river as river inputs, because the rivers are an important pathway for the plastic, then they circulate with this circulation. They end up mainly along the coast and in other areas of accumulation zone. Of course, they settle, they move according to their sizes and densities, and when at rough situation, conditions, rough weather conditions, they end up again at the top, and finally, when there is calm weather, they end up in the sediment. This circulation of the model, I do not know if this is working or not. So this circulation can be captured by the model, and then those accumulation points are being identified. The settling velocity. So the settling and the resuspension, as I said, this has been taken into account into the model. So we are trying actually to capture the natural variability of the plastics into the model. So we assign different sizes, we assign different densities. And according to those, the plastic particles settle down to the sediment, or they are suspended again with the rough conditions, as I said. We have also, Mira have mentioned the plastic soup and the experiments that we have done in the lab. And from this, the fragmentation, as we have seen it, that the sizes of the plastic is being subdivided into tiny ones. Well, this has been also accounted into the model. So what we were trying actually to capture with this model, to try to put the maximum physics that we can put to drive the plastics around, and also in the vertical, and also to have the characteristics and the natural variability of the plastics that we normally see when we go for the measurements. So what we have also discovered with this model, or the model was always looking at the sediments at all layers, so not only at the water column, but the sediment. And we have actually, the model was giving us the sign and the data in that way, that most of this concentration of the plastic is happening in the sediment. So we have actually generated within CleanSea a lot of measurements, a lot of information, not only to put it into the model or to drive the model, but also to understand what's happening in the nature out there, and to validate our model, because we are assuming that this model is predicting all of the North Sea in that case. So the river input was one of the things that we have measured, and we have actually looked at the screening of an amount of water in the rivers, and then we check what we have. And this is a measure of how much is coming from the rivers into the marine system. We have also looked out there in the marine, in the seas, in the sediment, in the bed of the sea. So there were fishing for litter. We're also having cross-sections along the sea, screening and sweeping the bottom of the sea. And this is what we find. All of this information has been actually generated within CleanSea. Moreover, also at specific point, scattered points at the mouth of the river, the sediment, the plastics in the sediment has been measured. Also, from other scattered points in the North Sea, there have been surveys to have measurement of the concentration of the plastics in the water column and in the sediment. All of this information have been an input to the model and used for model validation. So as a summary, why do we want to know? We would like to identify those accumulation zones or the hotspots because they are risk to the marine organism. What we would like also to know is that with this prediction of accumulation zone, we can have guided monitoring. So we tell people out there where to go and when to go and what to look for, at the surface or at the bottom. This can help and support targeting cleanup actions, but also policy measures, as Hans was saying today. As messages, using models in that way is a first step towards a full description of marine litter. It is a very generic model. It can be deployed in any other regional sea. The simulation showed for the North Sea that most of the plastics are along the beaches, and this is a proxy for cleanup actions, what's happening in the marine. Finally, the accumulation zones were mainly in the sediment more than in the surface. Teresa here is going to expand on the monitoring and the analysis.